President Trump also softening his tone on China after Friday's threat of new 100% tariffs on that country starting November 1st. Eunice Yoon is tracking all the latest developments in this story, and she joins us now with more, including the reaction in China. Eunice, good to see you.
Thanks, Becky. Well, after getting a strong response from the U.S., the Chinese are defending their approach to expand their export curbs. The Foreign Ministry today said the U.S. has continuously introduced a series of restrictions and sanctions against China, which have severely harmed China's interests. China firmly opposes this. So in other words, from Beijing's perspective, the Chinese are merely responding to what the U.S. already does. The Chinese are also threatening to retaliate against President Trump's 100% tariff threat. The Commerce Ministry over the weekend had pledged to take what they described as corresponding measures. At the same time, the Chinese appear to be trying to head off some of the negative response that they've been receiving from the U.S. for these expanded rare earths curbs, saying that the curbs do not equate a ban. There is speculation among China watchers as to what really has been motivating the Chinese decision to expand the rare earth curbs at this time, at a time when there are ongoing negotiations between the U.S. and China and an expected meeting between President Trump and President Xi at APEC at the end of this month. It could also, one line of thinking anyway, is that the Chinese potentially see this as a way to extract more concessions out of the U.S., so ramping up the pressure ahead of that expected meeting. There's also a line of thinking that this could be a way for re-escalating because the negotiations aren't going very well. Guys?
Eunice, I guess the big question comes down to how the response was received and then the backing off that President Trump kind of did on Air Force One, saying, we think we'll get things worked out. Has there been any state response to that?
Not on that particular post, but based on the response that we're seeing out of the Chinese, it seems as though the Chinese do not intend to back down or change their stance on their rare earths curbs. I think it potentially could mean that they believe that this is a good way to add leverage in these discussions to be able to get more concessions. And from the Chinese perspective, it would be seen that the ball is now in President Trump's court. So if he doesn't respond, that could mean that we wouldn't necessarily see any more escalation. Of course, if he does respond, then we would see an escalation, at least from the Chinese have been pledging that.
I mean, Eunice, it really depends on who's in a better position to weather the moves made on each side. And, you know, obviously China doing okay, but this is going to take us a large bite out of manufacturing. In fact, people are calling it de facto an embargo of China. Who's going to do business with China? So we'll see how long they can do this. And, you know, we were talking on Friday, this was the rare metal move was someone called it the economic equivalent of nuclear war. So when they were pointing at someone who shorted the market and made some money on Friday, anybody that couldn't, I mean, not everyone knew it was going to be down 800 points, but you knew Trump, given that, you know, 0.1% of the value is going to be looked at by China, you knew that there was going to be a move later in the session from Trump. And the way he's been with China in the past, it wasn't surprising at all. He said, OK, we're going back to 100%. Market sells off. But I'm just wondering who's in a better position. We've got a labor market slowdown over here and other, a government shutdown.
Yeah.
We've got our own problems. But I would venture that in China, things are even worse with thousands, tens of thousands of manufacturers that are going to be hit with this.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's obviously a very big concern for the manufacturing sector. People are generally not feeling very good about the economy more broadly. But when you look at, say, the export numbers from today, there were two things that people were taking away. One was that they beat expectations, that the factories were actually doing generally okay. But the other thing that I think was more important is that only 10% now of direct shipments come from the United States. So we're already seeing that the Chinese have been trying to move away from relying on the U.S. And then the Chinese government, at least the negotiators, are quite good at figuring out what the pressure points are for President Trump specifically. So we're seeing that with the rare earths, something that he was concerned about, and then also the soybeans, because soybean imports are now at a record high here, and none of them are coming from the United States. So, you could see how the Chinese are kind of steering the negotiations away from what maybe President Trump had prioritized in the past, which is fentanyl, as well as the trade deficit possibly. And now we're talking about rare earths and soybeans, and these matters that, are not so important for China, and of course important for President Trump politically back home.
Yeah, Eunice, I guess, what are the things that the Chinese would like to ask for in these negotiations? Because we used to look at rare earth minerals as the counter to what the U.S. was doing with its export controls when it came to technology and chips. But China moved last week to say, forget it, we want to make sure we're not getting any of those chips either. We don't want those anymore. So what are they looking for in terms of leverage, and what are they asking for?
Well, I mean, what we have seen is that the Chinese ideally would like to get those tariffs off, ideally would like to have the export controls on some of the technology, on the very high-tech stuff, off so that they could be able to get their hands on that. The messaging, of course, has been conflicted. We have seen that the Chinese are trying to not have the Chinese companies rely too heavily on the U.S. But, they do want to be able to get those higher-end advanced technology items.